Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to Becerra de Meneses. Today is Sunday, February 16th. Becerra de Meneses is a Spiritist association. We're non-profit. We only survive with your donations and volunteers. Our mission is to study Spiritism and promote the practice of spiritual and material charity. Our phone number is 305 477 4148, and our email is info@spiritist.com. We are broadcasting live on YouTube, so please, the phones in silence. Thank you very much. We'll be reading today, as every Sunday, from our book, Our Daily Bread, written by our dear Francisco Candido Javier and dictated by the Spirit of Emmanuel. We'll be talking about chapter 167, Understanding. Be transformed by the renewal of your understanding. You can see this in Romans chapter 12, verse 12. When we refer to the issue of spiritual transformation, the community of disciples of the gospel agrees with us as to its necessity, but not all express a perfect understanding of the matter. Deep down, they all yearn to change, but most aspire only to conventional change. Those less fortunate monetarily seek to scale the realm of material possibilities, while the holders of humble jobs strive for high positions. And in a disconcerting crescendo, nearly all plan the unfounded transformation of the opportunities at hand, immersing themselves in dreadful disorder. Essential renewal does not involve the fluctuating outer plane. Devoted Christians will not be transformed outwardly, but rather through understanding, endowing their own minds with new light and new concepts. Just as any earthly job requires that workers sincerely apply themselves to it, the job of mental growth requires a constant effort in doing good and achieving knowledge. Even here, it is important to realize that discipline will be a decisive factor, something that we many times lack. Therefore, do not become crystallized in wrongful ideas that have harmed you in the past. Be attentive to the structure of your reasoning today in light of the circumstances that surround you. Ask yourself how much understanding you have gained from the gospel so that you can correctly analyze this or that incident on your path. Do this, and the goodness of the Lord will assist you in the enlightening reply to yourself. In today's reflection, Emmanuel mentions that most disciples agree of the need for the gospel, yet their understanding of it is far from perfect. He mentions how nearly everyone strives for higher positions, don't we all? Pay much attention to the material opportunities at hand, sometimes immersing themselves into a horrifying disorder. Just as our daily jobs require our dedication and our effort, the job of spiritual growth also requires constant effort in doing good and acquiring knowledge. Let's pay attention to our reasoning. Let's ask ourselves, how much have we learned from the gospel? Let us do these, and the goodness of the Lord will illuminate us and help us find the answer to our own questions. And with those beautiful words from Emmanuel, let's do a little prayer. Let's close our eyes, relax in our chairs, take a deep breath, and let's elevate our thoughts to the Almighty and thank Him. Thank you, Master, for all the opportunities and all the blessings that we received every single day of our lives. Many, many times we don't see them, we don't appreciate them, but they are surrounding us, dear Lord. The light that you give us every morning, the air that we breathe, the birds and the flowers and nature. Thank you for all those blessings that you have given us. Thank you for our families, our friends, our jobs. Thank you for the roof that we have over our head. We're so blessed, dear Lord. Thank you so much. We ask you, dear Master, to share your light upon all of us, to share your light upon the suffering, those that are in pain, those that are here, those that haven't been able to come. Give them your blessings, dear Lord, especially for those that are hungry, suffering, those children that have no food in their plate. Bless them with your love, with your strength, as that will be the food that will nourish them, their spirit. Thank you, dear Lord, for all the things again. And with those words, we ask you also to bless our dear sister Margarita. She's going to give us today's gospel with the help of her mentors and your blessings. We ask you for these in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. So be it. Thank you. Margarita.
Good morning, everybody. For those that are here with us and those that are listening in YouTube, we're very happy to be here today on this long President's Weekend. And the chapter that we're going to study or review is a beautiful chapter because it talks to us when Jesus was on the mountain and he gave us these teachings. And it is blessed are the poor of spirit. It's chapter 7 in the Gospel according to Spiritism. It's not that long of a chapter, but there's a lot in there. So what we usually recommend is that you study your Gospel at home. Once you get there, review, go in depth, because we only have a little bit of time to go. So we're going to find out what this chapter is about. The chapter is in the Gospel, according to Spiritism, as we said, and it deals with what should be understood by the words poor in spirit. Then it talks to us about he who exalts himself shall be debased. It talks about mysteries that are hidden from the learned and prudent. And then the spirits come and they speak to us and they tell us these are their instructions: pride and humility, mission of the intelligent person. So we won't be able to do the whole chapter. As I said, we'll just touch a little bit on it, and we recommend that you do review the chapter at home. But what is the meaning of the words poor in spirit? Because if you're going by poor, you're going to think poor is the opposite of rich, right? So somebody who's poor is somebody that doesn't have anything, maybe a homeless person or something. But the gospel and Jesus, through his teachings, especially in the Beatitudes, explains to us exactly what is poor in spirit. And Jesus tells us through Matthew in chapter 5, verse 3, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." By the poor in spirit, Jesus did not mean devoid of intelligence, but the humble, inasmuch as he said that the kingdom of heaven would be for them and not for the prideful. I'm going to stop here because if I read, you're going to go to sleep and there's too much information. So instead, with all due respect, I'm going to take a story from this book from Yvonne Pereira. It's on the canvas of the infinite, and it is by the spirits Becerra de Menezes. Dr. Becerra de Menezes is our mentor, and Camilo Castelo Branco, and I'm sure I pronounced it wrong because they're obviously Brazilian. And I'm just going to take a little piece, even if we take the whole time, because I thought this was a perfect example of the chapter. And then we'll fast forward and you can study at home. This story, or just the one chapter from it, takes place in November of 1928 in Minas Gerais. And it's a young girl who had an argument with her mother. I don't know if anybody here has difficulties or arguments with their mother ever, but it happens. And sometimes the mothers have arguments with the daughter, or the son has arguments with the father. But it happens, right? Okay, so you can blend right in there and understand. And what happened, I'm going to try and go by memory, but I'll probably have to go back. It was an unpleasant incident. And she, the young girl, was very sad because her mother was saying something that she felt was an injustice. And that happens. You know, sometimes we get blamed for things that we didn't do or something. And not we, but the young people, there's two young people here, younger today, probably do something and they're saying, well, I didn't do that, or I didn't mean to say that. And the parents are do. So it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to be young, and it's hard to be a parent. So we have to find that fine line of communication where it's a two-way street. Because if you don't speak to your parents, how was school? Okay. Did you do anything? No. Do you have homework? No. So you're fishing. You want to get in their head and find out, but we're not getting answers. So it's hard. But I know it's hard for the children as well. So she just went in her room and she said, started crying, and she was very sad. But the sadness moved her, touched her, where she started praying. And she happened to live across from an agriculture college in Minas Gerais, which is still there. And of course, I won't find it now. Let me see if I can find it. Wait. Now I really want to find it. Is Lavras a city? Lavras? Right. It's a city in Lavras, and it's beautiful in Minas Gerais. And she started looking at all the beautiful, because if you're next to an agricultural college, everything, they must grow the natural trees and whatever. They had jabuticaba. That I pronounce good because I tasted it and I love it. And it stains your clothes, right? The juice of it stains your clothes, so you have to be careful, but it's delicious. So she was there, and then she started praying because she was touched, emotions from having had the argument with her mother, and she was, bless you, in deep prayer. She started praying, and then she was thinking of St. Francis of Assisi, and she was doing his prayer and whatever. And all of a sudden, she just decided there was magnetism that drew her to go to sleep. And she went to sleep. And just as soon as she went to sleep, that same magnetic flow drew her away, and she left. She just lifted up, because all of you know that at night we separate from our spirit. It's the emancipation of the spirit. So literally every night you die. What happens is the body stays here, but the spirit goes to work. Depending on where your mind was during the day, you go. Maybe you do good, maybe you do not so good, maybe you do bad, but I'm sure everybody here doesn't. And at that moment, she was lifted up, and she went into the room where her mother was on the sewing machine, upset like she always was. She was always in a bad mood, and she was sewing. And she went to her mother in spirit and gave her a hug and a kiss and asked for forgiveness. She said, Mom, I'm sorry. Of course, the mother didn't see her, but the mother was touched as well. And then she flew and she left to do her work, as many of us do at night. When she left, she just kept going through Minas Gerais, going, and then seeing the beautiful scenery and whatever. And then she was going to another place, and everything was changing, and she was trying to figure out where she was. But there was this beautiful light in front of her that was shining. It was a beautiful light. She felt like she wanted to be with that light, but she didn't know who that light was. But she knew there was something. There was something there, but she couldn't quite reach it. So she continued to going. And then suddenly she saw something white here. Like let's say the white beard. She saw that white part here, and she wondered, who is that? And whenever she went, and then suddenly he turned and she turned. And it was Dr. Becerra de Menezes. He was taking her somewhere. She was being led by Dr. Becerra de Menezes. Where was she going? To Rio. She was now over Rio, and they were starting to descend. Beautiful, beautiful places in Rio, but they continued to darker places, and they ended up in a favela. And then it was the thickness of it was very hard for her, because in her mediumship, she began to feel sadness. She began to feel hunger. She began to feel crime. And she said, why am I being brought here? What happened? What did I do? Or what were my thoughts that I am now here being led by Dr. Becerra de Meneses? So she got there, and then they kept going lower and lower. Finally, they went to what looked like a hole. It wasn't even, you could call a little shack. It was like a hole. And then in that hole was a young woman around 20 years old, laying down, but on the floor. She didn't even have a mattress or nothing. And her blanket was made of a sack, like a sack that used for rice or beans or coffee, cut. And that was her burlap sack. That was. And next to her were two girls. One was about 10 years old and one was about 12 years old. They were her sisters. And they were, all three were very skinny, hardly no clothes, sad, just a total darkness there. And Dr. Becerra explained to her, she said, the reason that we're here is because this sister is in her last days of life. But the reason that she hasn't left is because she doesn't want to leave her two sisters, because who's going to care for them? So through prayers of the family in the spiritual plane and people in her own neighborhood, I've been called to help. And so that's why we're here now, to help in these last moments, more so to help the two sisters, because she can't leave. He said the shadow of death should come to her today, but it's not going to take over until she's able to resolve the situation with her sisters. So what happened? He came down and he went to the sister, the older one, the one that was 12, and he whispered something in her ear. Dr. Becerra de Meneses. He whispered something in her ear. And immediately she got up, she got her sister's hands. Come on, let's go. She said, where are we going? Where are we going? Goes, I got an idea. We're going to go see Mother P. And she said, Mother P? Who's that? And she started running to the convent where the nuns were. And this Yvonne Pereira, in her mediumship, saw them going into the convent, and an older nun, you know what's a convent and a nun, right? How do you say it in Portuguese? The other thing, the nun. That. She had here, white hair, gray hair, and she had her little veil, and she saw her embracing the girls. So she said, now they're going to be okay. Then he said, our job is done. I brought you here for a reason, because you think your life is not fair, and you think you're going through difficulties. But just like these three sisters, there's so much pain in this world. You have no idea. Now other spirits are coming here, and they're going to take over the disincarnation of this young woman. Our mission was to get the sisters help, and we'll continue praying for her. And very fast, she was back in her home, waking up, and he left. Now we're going back to this, and I'll tell you further the story towards the end, okay? So when Jesus tells us about poor in spirit, by saying the kingdom of heaven belongs to the poor in spirit, he teaches us that nobody's going to be admitted without a simple heart. We can't be arrogant. We can't believe that we know everything and we are everything, and we're going to leave here and go to a better place. As we all know, there are millions and millions of planets, stars or planets. It's not that you go from here to heaven or hell. You'll go according to your own level of vibrations, and however you were here, it's going to be over there. That's why people say, well, Martians don't exist. They do. It's different type of spirit. That's all. And what Jesus tells us is, I tried to put the yellow as good and the red as bad. Humility. In all circumstances, Jesus put humility into the category of virtues that bring us near to God. So the more humble that we are, the closer we'll be to God. But pride is in the category of vices that keep us away from God. We are all proud to a certain degree. Those that say that they're so humble, well, you know why we're proud? Because we carry the last name that we do, that we're from the country that we are, that we speak the language that we do. These parents are proud of their children, and I hope the children are proud of their parents as well, because they have great parents, and so forth and so forth and so forth. We like a certain soccer team, we like the Miami Heat, we like Florida, we like whatever. We're proud of that. But it doesn't mean that because we have that type of pride, we're bad and we're going to rot in hell. That's not how it is. It doesn't work that way. So the reason for this is clear. For to be humble is an act of submission, whereas pride is a revolt against him. When you're proud, everything that you have is yours. You're not opening your heart to share. You don't care if somebody's out on the street begging. We only live for ourselves. So they're two complete opposites. And then Jesus set the example of let the children come to me. And he told us that he called a little, well, here, at the same time the disciples were saying to him, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child to him and set him in the midst of them and said, verily I say to you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom. So whosoever shall humble himself as a child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And who shall receive one child, little child, in the name of God receiveth me. Well, who doesn't like a child, a baby, or little children? It's almost impossible. You're in a grocery store, in a cart, and you see a little child or a baby, whatever, a commercial. Everybody loves children. So that's how, put 3, 4, 5, put an Asian, Hispanic, African American, and Indian children together playing in a park, 2 years old. They have absolutely no misconceptions or prejudices. They will play, they will laugh on whatever. Where do they grow up with that? It's us. We're putting that. All those, there's nobody here. All those Mexicans are all lazy. What is that? We have a Mexican here who works very hard in the caravan of love. Well, we can't, you cannot generalize. They don't know that. They're not born with that instinct. So who's to blame? We are. We are. So here it also gives the example of somebody who's very, very rich. If you're very, very rich, is it hard to be humble? It's a little bit hard only because you have the ability to get what you want. You want the Maserati, you get it. You want to fly on your Learjet to Kuwait, you go. Wherever you want to go, you go. So it makes it a little bit harder, but they tell us that being rich is much more of a trial, more difficult trial than being poor, because you have to share and you have to let people love you for what you are, not for what you have. So there's another explanation. It's the explanation that Spiritism gives us. Spiritism confirms its theory through other examples when it shows us that those that are great in the spiritual world are those who were small on here. And we have the example of the queen who was here and left and went to the spiritual plane, and her servants were way above her spiritually. And she as a queen was down here. And she had so much to catch up on and to do because she had struggled. And so he says, frequently those who were great and powerful on earth find themselves extremely low. And it also says, if they have allowed themselves to be dominated by pride, so the yellow part at the end, therefore do not seek the highest positions on earth, nor place yourself above others if you do not wish to be obligated to descend. On the contrary, seek the most humble and modest positions, seeing that God will give you a more elevated place in heaven if you deserve. So it's a little difficult for us to place ourselves at the bottom because we always try to be the best. In school, you're taught to get the best grade. If you're in sports, you're going to compete to get the gold medal or whatever it is. Maybe your neighbor has a yard that's very, very green, and yours has weed, well, you're going to start pulling them out because you want to be like that. So we're led by those things. But that doesn't mean that you can't be humble. That doesn't mean they're two different things. We can be competitive. We can do all the things that we want, but we can still do it with humbleness. We can do it with humbleness. If we know a family next door that has absolutely no food, we can get a bag of groceries and say, you know what? I'm going on vacation and these groceries are going to get bad. Can you do me a favor and take them before they spoil? There's always a way to do it, but it has to be with a humble heart, with a humble heart. So we're going to go back to the story now. Why was this young girl in this situation? What had happened to her? We don't know what happened to us while we're here, or maybe some of you do. She was a nurse, and so she obviously was an educated person. She had to go to school and pass her test and everything to become a nurse. She was a nurse, and she got a job caring for a person, elder person, who was ill. And in caring for that person, she was making good money. She was able to take care of her two sisters. He had problems, breathing problems. And she contracted tuberculosis from him because he had it. And so they ended up taking him and putting him in a nursing home, and then she was stuck with tuberculosis. But she wasn't being punished because she took care of him. She had another background. Obviously, everything in life, there's a cause and there's an effect. Well, what happened? Because she had the tuberculosis, she could no longer work as a nurse. So she went to work somewhere else, ironing clothes. She had to leave where she used to live and live in more moderate conditions. And then the people weren't even giving her the jobs to iron because they had to touch her to give her the clothes. So little by little, she was now the person that was the nurse, the beautiful nurse and whatever, and had a lot of pride, found herself in the street begging, that she would have never done it when she was proud. But she wasn't begging for herself. She was begging for her two sisters. And now she was at this point in life where she was going to disincarnate. And what was happening? She was looking at the mirror of her life, at all the things that she had gone through in her life. Her arrogance, her beauty, that she thought, being vain is also very difficult because it goes contrary to being humble. And you can be beautiful, but you don't have to be vain. You can be handsome, but you don't have to be vain. It's all right. It's how we deal with it. And so Dr. Becerra de Menezes reminded Ivan Pereira that everything has a cause and everything has an effect. And although we think at the time that because we're young, we're beautiful, and we may have money and whatever, it's not going to last forever. And there are a lot of people in the spiritual plane, young people that have passed away, that have written books in the library, calling out to young people, telling them, wake up, because this is not forever. The body is not immortal. The spirit is. And so Dr. Becerra ended the story by reminding her that she would come back, and she would have an opportunity to make up for weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. Whoever says they're not weak, well, they maybe have not found them. It could be like in my case, chocolate. It could be anything, whatever it is, but we do have weaknesses. And then this beautiful chapter ends with these words from the spirits that tell us, through the spirits' teachings, pride and humbleness of heart. Humility is a virtue much forgotten amongst you. They're talking to us, okay? The spirits are talking to us. Of the many examples given, very few have been followed. However, it is possible to be charitable to your neighbor without being humble, is it? Of course not, because this sentiment reduces mankind to the same level by telling them that they are brothers and sisters who should help one another mutually, which leads them to a state of goodness. I always remind my Sunday school students that we're all brothers and sisters of the same God, independent of what we call that God, Allah, Jehovah, whatever. We're all brothers and sisters. It doesn't matter where we live or what we study or what we do. So without humility, you are merely adorning yourself with virtues that you do not possess, as if you used clothes especially for the purpose of hiding some physical deformity. Remember, He who saved us. Remember His humility, which was so great. And they're talking about Jesus. Jesus at all times was humble. We never heard of Jesus being arrogant or proud. So he says, remember He who saved us. Remember His humility, which was so great as to put Him above all the prophets. So humble was He that His teachings still remain with us. Pride is the terrible adversary of humility. So as I invited you at the beginning of the chapter, please study chapter 7 when you have a chance in your gospel at home, or if you come here to Sunday school, or if you study ESDE, go into it more depth because of time restraints. We don't have the ability to do that, but you'll see what a beautiful chapter it is and how easy it is to follow. You just have to remind yourself in the morning when you wake up and you do your morning and your evening prayers that we need to be humble, because we are preparing a place where we're going to go when we leave here based on our actions. Thank you so much. So if you'll sit down, please, and take a deep breath and relax. And let us connect with our Father. Dear God, dear Jesus, our perfect model, our Savior, our best friend of all times, our dear Dr. Becerra de Menezes, all those from the spiritual plane that prepared our humble Becerra de Menezes Center so that we could come today and receive the teachings of the gospel according to Spiritism, so that we could receive your blessings, dear Lord, in the form of vibrations, of passes, of hugs and smiles from our brothers and sisters. We thank you, dear Lord, that we're able to gather under this humble abode in the name of Jesus. And we ask you, dear Lord, for all the needy, wherever they may be, within our four walls or outside. And we ask you all these things, dear Lord, in Jesus' name.